Good evening, everyone. My name is John Mensah. I'll be presenting on the Ebola virus, and I will focus in on Nebraska, or the patients that were transported to the Nebraska facility where the Ebola treatment was being handled. Its first victim will be Dr. Sakara, and I'll give a little brief information about who he is and how he contracted the disease. So first things first, Dr. Sakara arrived in Nebraska University Medical Center on September 5th, 2014. He was a missionary doctor in Libya, where he was caring for patients, and it was through caring for patients when he contracted the disease. At the time, he didn't know that he had contracted the disease, so after feeling some of the symptoms of the disease, he was transported to the United States, where he would eventually receive care. I chose to take a look at this study because I wanted to hone in or to draw attention to the role that the EMS played in keeping the epidemic, in keeping the contamination or the transmission of the virus down. It could have gotten worse once he had reached the United States. But because of the preparation of the EMS and the folks at the Nebraska Medical Center, there was no other contaminations or no other transmissions. And I like to put it out there that no one in the United States got the virus from here, as in the United States. Everyone who contracted the virus contracted it from another country and was transported here. The only exceptions are the two nurses who contracted the virus because they were taking care of individuals who were patients who had contracted the virus. So those were the only two people who contracted the virus from the United States. And like I said, that was because they were taking care of people who already had the virus. So moving on. So we'll look at the EMS, and then we'll also highlight the capacity for us to detect and respond to public health threats in the United States. And also the fact that we were prepared to handle events like this. It helped us in mitigating the spread of the virus. So the Ebola virus or disease is a severe and often fatal illness in humans. So the virus itself is transmitted to people from wild animals, and then it spreads in the human population through human-to-human transmissions. So the cycle of transmission, it has been linked to fruit bats. So basically, these fruit bats may come in contact either directly or indirectly with animals in the wildlife, and then they transmit the virus onto these animals that way. And then the animals would also transmit the virus the same way to humans. And one of the fastest way in which the virus had an impact on human life in West Africa was the fact that the people there were killing these animals and eating them or consuming them as food, which is why the virus had a great impact on the lives in West Africa. But moving on, like I said, the average Ebola case fatality rate is about 50%. And the most popular strains that we all know about will be like the Zaire or the Zaire strain of the virus, which was one of the powerful strains out there in 1976 when it was first put on the radar. So as you can see, this map shows places where the Ebola virus can be found. As you can see, the United States is not one of them, so no one has any reason to worry. But that doesn't mean that we can't have an outbreak. But as of now, it's contained in the continent of Africa and also this part of the world. So I've already explained what the deadly cycle is. Like I said, the fruit bats are virus reservoirs. They come in direct or indirect contact with animals, and then the animals get the virus. They eventually get sick. They pass it on to humans, and we humans would also pass it on to other humans through the mucous membrane. So some of the symptoms include bleeding, vomiting, sometimes with blood, skin rashes, diarrhea, muscles and joint pain. So basically the disease dehydrates the body and puts the body in fatigue. So the incubation period for the disease is about 21 days. So if anyone ever contracts the disease, you have 21 days to see if you have it or not. If there are no symptoms after 21 days, consider yourself lucky. But the incubation period is 21 days. So in preparation, the Nebraska Biocontainment Unit spent 8 years preparing for the crises. And like I said, they were not preparing for an Ebola crisis, but they were preparing themselves for an event as big as this crisis, because this could have easily gotten out of hand and have spread through the entire United States. So they did a great job with that. Also, the Department of State and the Phoenix Air arranged air transportation to Omaha to deliver the patient to the hospital. The reason why they did such a great job in containing the virus was because of the local relationships that they had. Communication did flow from top to bottom and bottom to the top. Local partners included the fire department, who were responsible for the EMS and medical car chase, the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, Douglas Department of Health, and Nebraska State Patrol. So, in preparing the ambulance to transport Dr. Sakara, the EMS went through great lengths in making sure that there was no contamination in the ambulance, and also any contaminations coming into the ambulance. So they went as far as wrapping the entire insides of the ambulance with plastic sheets to contain the virus in the car and not out of the car. Afterwards, after the patient was delivered to the hospital, they scrubbed the entire ambulance. They mopped the floors of the hospital elevator. So they had a plan, and I think that's the theme here. Planning goes a long way, and I think they were able to execute this crisis by great detail and planning. And then afterwards, all those who were involved were monitored for 21 days to make sure that they did not have, or they did not come in contact with the virus. Of course, even though everything went smoothly well, there were some issues that came up along the way. One of them was the legality issues in moving infectious patients between countries and also across state lines. There was also public overreaction, and schools were closed because one school found out that one of the administrators were on the same plane as one of the other individuals who had contracted the virus. So the school shut down, and decontaminated the entire school. So that was an overreaction. Also, airports and other ports of entry. At the time, America was trying to respond, or was trying to contain the virus. So they looked into different solutions, and one of the solutions they looked into was instituting a travel ban on the countries who had the virus. But the Obama administration deemed that as an ineffective way of containing the virus. So security, or port of entry security, was a big issue at the time. And I think that if they had planned and had protocols on what to do in events such as this, they wouldn't have had this issue. Also, the PPEs that were designed to help protect the health workers were found to be heavy, and also it was very foggy, so it wasn't very conducive to protecting, or conducive to the work that the health workers were doing. The one thing that I could say that was done really well in this case, or in containing the virus, was the establishments of the biocontainment units. A plan was already made, and all that needed to be done was for the event to happen and the plan to be put into motion. So lessons learned. We learned that information sharing was great between the local partners and the containment center. And also, we've learned that the PPE had issues with it, and the issues have been fixed by the creation of lighter PPE garments. Planning was great, but we learned that a little flexibility in these kind of situations will go a long way. The legalities of quarantine. Lawmakers are now trying to figure out what kind of legal actions that can be taken on individuals who do not want to be contained once they have been identified as individuals who may have contagious viruses or disease. Also, air purifiers, respirators pose a logical contamination challenge, considering that Ebola can possibly be an airborne disease. It's not conducive to have an air purifier respirator. It just doesn't make sense. In terms of public health, the closest thing I could think of in terms of diseases would be the 2018 or 2017-2018 flu season. It was a disaster because the vaccines that were produced to cure that strain of the flu virus did not work. And the ramifications of that was that it killed many people, and approximately 172 children died. That was just children. So again, it does not compare to the Ebola virus, but that's like the next closest thing that I could find that was similar in that sense. Thank you for listening.